Hey everybody, and welcome to another ranking video. So these videos are going to be coming thick and fast because I have picked up a lot of new games recently. If you don't know what this series is about, it's where I talk about the last 10 new to me board games that I played and I rank them from my least favourite up to my most favourite. So I've got a pretty interesting list here, some really popular games on there. So let's get started. Straight after, I give a shout out to KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer when it comes to purchasing board games. And if you use the link in my show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. At number 10, I have Pyramid of the Sun, which is a pretty unassuming small box card game about building a communal pyramid with your opponents. There are two bits of information that you need to consider. Number one is the points on the card, and the second one is the level of the pyramid that you're building that card on. So basically, the lowest of those two categories will be what you're scoring. So let's say I had a card with 3 points on it and I built it on the second level of the pyramid, I'd only score 2 points because 2 points is lower than 3. That's pretty much the whole game. You're either taking cards or playing cards out, trying to block your opponents from making great big moves, and that's pretty much it. You keep playing until you complete the whole pyramid. There's quite a big luck factor involved by not drawing these kind of side pieces or the actual final top piece of the pyramid, but it's absolutely fine. It's pretty quick. Decisions are fairly obvious, and there is a big degree of luck of the card draw here. So, nothing special, but not abysmal either. That is Pyramid of the Sun at number 10. At number 9, I have Sierra West. Now, this is a game that's been sat on my shelf of shame for quite a long time now. I've heard mixed things about this one over the years, but there were a few ideas here that I thought were quite novel and ones that I were interested in trying myself. And the idea of slotting these cards into your player board, which will create two independent tracks for your workers to go along, and you can move these along at your own pace, kind of getting resources and bonuses as you go, climbing this mountain, unlocking better cards for yourself, a little bit of kind of collecting resources and cashing them in to get points. And for me, this is one of those games that's pretty loosey-goosey. It seems like no matter what you do, you get resources for, and you've always just got enough to do what you needed to do. So I never really felt like I was working towards anything here. Again, it was pretty forgiving and pretty obvious on how I was going to approach it. So these games leave me feeling a little bit numb. I don't really see the need to go and explore anymore. I do like the idea of those two kind of meeples going along, but ultimately I thought it was, again, just a pretty obvious and not a great implementation of that mechanism. So one that's forgettable for me, that is Sierra West at number 9. At number 8, I have In the Footsteps of Darwin, a brand new game by Sorry We Are French. This is a ultra simple set collection style game. You're drafting tiles off this communal board, placing them on your own board, trying to build rows and columns, and basically getting points in different ways. Some are worth pure points, some are worth no points, but will give you points based on other tiles, or these kind of compasses that you're collecting, different things like that. There are a million games like this out there. I don't think this one does anything to really differentiate itself from the pack. Decisions are very obvious here. Looks lovely. It feels like almost like a souvenir from a museum or something. But the gameplay, despite being some nice introductions, or maybe it could be an introduction to some brand new gamers, to some set collection mechanisms, I don't think it's going to hold up to repeated plays at all. A very predictable gameplay, and it does struggle to find its niche here. And if you want a game like this, I'd really recommend something like Floriferous over it, because it does pretty much everything but better. So therefore, I can't really recommend In the Footsteps of Darwin, despite me really wanting to like it, because I did like the visuals of it, and it looked really cool, and it was produced to a high standard. At number 7, I have Tindea. So Tindea is a strange one for me to talk about because I had probably the worst teach I've ever had of a board game. But this is a cooperative Euro game where you're fighting off these threats by traveling around these islands, collecting resources, donating them to the gods, trying to keep these threat tracks low, or suffer pretty horrible consequences. I loved how dynamic the board state was here, as at the end of each round these kind of tsunamis would go off and would wipe out islands, or volcanoes would explode and create new lands. So it actually was a very interesting and almost cinematic style board game experience as things, or the map would physically change as you went on. I definitely think this game was overdone, overwrought, too much going on here. Didn't really know when to edit some rules out, some filliness, some convolution and complexity that didn't need to be there. I think if you like Spirit Island, you'd probably like this one. It's definitely a bit more Eurified than that, but there is some crossover between the two. But you have to be prepared that you're getting into quite a heavy game here. Lots of rules minutiae and things like that. But I like the idea of it, and it was way better than I thought it was going to be. And I'll probably play it again if pressed to, and bearing in mind the teacher could actually teach it. But other than that, not something I'm really going to look for myself. But again, if somebody brought it to a games night and there's nothing else to play, I'll say, you know what, let's give it another go. So that is Tindea at number 7. At number 6, I have Dune Imperium, an immensely popular and highly rated game. And to be honest, if I was judging these games completely objectively, I would put this one higher in the list. But there were just some games that matched my personal taste a little bit more. But this is a worker placement deck building hybrid, as you are using these cards not only as a kind of a gateway to place your workers on different locations, but also as currency to buy new cards and do different things at the end of each round. I thought the competition to get to the different worker placement spots was hot and fierce, which I like in my worker placement games. I actually did like the combat mechanism as well, as you'd be putting these people into this kind of fight pit really, and whoever's got the most there would get benefits. It was kind of like a majority thing rather than a more confrontational mechanism there. And it did ramp up as well as the game went on, and that winning those fights became more and more important. Different things to go down. I played with all the expansions in for my first game, which I thought was fine, considering that it's pretty much everything the game had to offer. It was still pretty digestible if you're familiar with some tried and tested board game mechanisms, and I thought it was really good. So I definitely think that I can see why people would like this game so much. Again, it's just not quite my personal taste, but I'm really glad that I have a chance to play it. I'm not really into the Dune theme at all. I've not ever seen the new movies or the old ones, and I've also I tried reading the books, but I couldn't even get into them. So it's not even a theme I'm invested in either, which may have played a small part in me not rating it as high. But I would play it again. I definitely thought it was enjoyable, and way more so than I thought it was going to be. That is Dune Imperium at number 6. At number 5, I have Twisty Tracks. Now this is a brand new kind of a silly puzzly style game that's very familiar to a game called Suro, if you remember that one. A game where you are placing tiles down and you're automatically moving, or in this example trains, onto the next tile by following these windy tracks. And in this one you're trying to keep those trains as active as long as possible, because for every tile you pass through you get a point. But you want to be careful not to kind of collide them into each other and all these different stuff. And there's also a pressure to reach these stations on the edge of the board, because if you're the first people to make them there or take them there, you will get some additional end game points. So there's this kind of pressure of how long do I want to keep them kind of driving around in relation to how quick do I want to get into the station to guarantee me those higher amounts of points. That's pretty much the whole game, very silly fun, very simple, but it's a nice one to introduce to non-gamers. It plays pretty quickly, and it's just one of those games where you can embrace the carnage and the kind of chaotic nature of it, but still have a good time. So that is Twisty Tracks at number 5. At number 4, I have Fuji Flush by Friedemann Friese. This is a very simple card shedding game. That's all you're doing, you're playing these cards out, and as long as nobody has played a higher card than you by the time it gets round to you, then you can ditch that card out and not have to, or not be forced to draw a new one. But the twist on this game is that when you've played a card out, all the other players can play lower cards as long as they're the same number and combine their score together. So say I played a 10 down, but then the other 3 players or 4 players played a 3 each, that'd be 3, 6, 9, 12. They've beaten my 10, therefore I'm forced to shed my card, and then they've managed to basically force me to pick up a new card, I suppose, and they can shed theirs. So that's the way the game works really. So you've got this kind of teamwork thing going on, but it is competitive at the same time. Maybe some little wrinkles beneath the surface to add some decision space here, but it is a good blend of clever play with luck, with a bit of bluffing, a bit of teamwork, a bit of, you know, collaborating with your teammates or opponents. And it's just a nice, fun little game that sadly does require higher player counts to get the most from it, which might keep it from hitting my table terribly often. But if I do have those high player counts and I want a 10-15 minute game, then this is a really good option and it's going to stay around in my collection for sure. So that is Fuji Flush at number 4. At number 3, I have Rossio, which was definitely a pleasant surprise for me. So this is a puzzly tile placement game with some kind of pattern building as you're trying to make this road full of all these lovely little tiles that not only you're contributing to, but your opponents are as well. And you're playing these kind of pattern cards down to try and score them. Bear in mind they match the patterns on the actual road itself, but I love the fact that they score multiple times. So if there's a particular pattern that keeps on, you know, developing on the board, then you can play this particular card and score it tons of times. And not only do you score it once, you score it in multiple rounds as well, because those cards are active for several rounds. But that's not as far as the game goes. It's actually a small economic edge to this one as well, as you need to be making sure that you're generating income by not only playing the pattern cards, but by playing these money cards. Because they're going to give you some passive income and let you play more pattern cards. So there is a good push and pull between the two. There's some restrictions on how you place the tiles, which can become important. And I just tend to like everything about this one. So this one I've just put just below a recommendation at the moment, because it is, you know, is it going to hold up multiple times to fit into that kind of, you know, chairman's commendation level of attainment? I've got a feeling that it will after a few plays, so stay tuned. I'll keep you updated on videos like what's been hitting my table, that kind of things. But as right now, I'm really impressed with Rossio. So only 2 commendations at this time. The first of which, at number 2, is Saint Marlo. So Saint Marlo is one of the original roll and write style game, as you're rolling a big bunch of dice in a Yahtzee style fashion, where you can, you know, get 2 re-rolls essentially, and then you are choosing one of these symbols that have been rolled to either kind of get you points in different ways by building these churches, or you can collect these resources to build new buildings. You can draw these walls out that will prevent you losing points when these threats attack you. And you know what, it works really well actually. I like the way you have to juggle everything. There's different things you can go for, some good combos. And I just think it's a very nice, well put together game that's held up well, considering how many of these, you know, roll and write, flip and write style games are out there. This was kind of you know, one of the front runners of that style of game. So the fact that it does hold its own after all this time and so much competition does kind of say a lot about its quality. This was a borderline one for me. I wasn't quite sure whether to put it into that 7+ bracket. But right now I'm happy to put it there. Maybe it'll fall down later, maybe it'll go up later, I'm not sure. But right now I'm liking Saint Marlo a lot. And finally, at number 1, I have Nomalia. So Nomalia, brand new small box card game that I was not expecting to be half as good as what it actually is. So this game doesn't really do anything new, but it does kind of hijack a bunch of different mechanisms from different games. But the core part of the game is those kind of overlapping style games, as you have cards that are divided up into 4 sections. They have 4 different terrains on, and also different animal types on them. Now what you're trying to do is you're drafting these in a simple pass and draft, 7 Wonders style draft, and then mapping them out in front of you to build a little 6x6 grid, or a maximum of 6x6 grid, but you always have to overlap at least one of those squares. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to build patterns in relation to these public objectives, but it does adopt that scoring mechanism that was made famous by games like Isle of Skye and games like Cartographers, where every round only 2 of those possible 5 scoring conditions will score. So say in round 1, you know, A and B will score, round 2, maybe A and C will score, round 3, you know, B and D will score, this kind of thing. You know, you've seen it before, but this game does it to a really high standard, because you can adjust on the fly. You might think, you know what, this category isn't scoring anymore, therefore I'm going to cover these symbols up and amplify this one. So it's always chopping and changing, doing what you're doing. Again, doesn't do anything new, but it does what so many games do to a better degree, in my opinion. I think this is this kind of takes bits from like Cascadia, it takes bits from Isle of Skye, of course, like games like Hokkaido, Circle the Wagons, Agropolis. All these things I think are put into a better game, which is Nomalia. So Nomalia, definitely unassuming, tiny box, and I think this one could be a sleeper hit if more people knew about it. It is new. I suppose the jury is still out if this is going to be a hit or not, but take my word for it. If you want a nice family weight game that's easy to play, you can teach this one in about a minute, but it is still going to satisfy brand new gamers as well as seasoned gamers, because that puzzle is so taxing, about what you should cover and what you should leave revealed. So that is Nomalia, a strong number 1 for me at this time. So there we have it. That concludes the video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it and have discovered a thing or two about a game that you didn't know about. If you have enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.